The Vexler Armada had crushed 1,000 civilizations. They operated on a single, brutal principle. If a species could not project power beyond its own star, it was insectal, and its worlds were forfeit. For 3 generations, they had watched Earth, a cacophony of warring tribes, fleeting empires, and primitive rocket probes. Humanity, in their final assessment, was clever but fractured, doomed to die on their cradle. The Armada's arrival was not an invasion. It was an extermination, a cosmic footnote. They expected panic, primitive nuclear fireworks, then silence. They did not expect the Remember Maru, a vessel not of unified Earth, but of a forgotten, scorned people. A ship built not for glory, but for remembrance. A ship whose very existence was a testament to a truth the universe had forgotten. Humanity is at its most dangerous not when it fights for conquest, but when it fights for home. The sky over Earth fractured, not with clouds, but with the impossibly sharp angles and necrotic purple energy signatures of the Vexler Vanguard. 1,000 ships, each the size of a mountain range, slid into orbit with a silence that was more terrifying than any sound. Their communication was a single psychic pulse broadcast directly into the neural pathways of every human on the planet. It carried no malice, only a chilling, absolute certainty. You are insectal. Your resource allocation is inefficient. Your planet is reclaimed. You have one of your planetary rotations to cease organized activity. Resistance is illogical and will be metabolized. Panic, as predicted, was instantaneous. Global networks collapsed under the strain of sheer terror. Governments issued contradictory statements, some promising defiance, others pleading for calm that would not come. The great unified Earth Defense Fleet, a proud symbol of a decade of fragile cooperation, powered its reactors. For 8 minutes, it was a beacon of hope. Then, the Vexler's primary weapon, the null beam, lanced out. It didn't explode its targets. It unraveled them at the molecular level, turning 3 state-of-the-art battleships into expanding clouds of inert dust. The message was received. Humanity's best was a child's toy. In a hidden command bunker deep under the Swiss Alps, the last remnants of Earth's strategic command watched the holographic displays die one by one. General Anya Petrova, her face carved from granite and despair, listened to the final report. "Ma'am, the fleet is gone. All orbital defenses are silent. They're starting atmospheric descent for population center sterilization." A young lieutenant, his voice cracking, whispered, "Then, that's it? We just wait to be metabolized." Before Petrova could offer a hollow platitude, a separate, older console flickered to life. It was a hardline, non-networked system, a relic from a more paranoid age. On it, a simple text string scrolled, originating from a point just beyond the moon's orbit. It was a priority identifier code, one not seen in over 40 years. Code, Memento Mori. God in heaven. Petrova breathed, a spark igniting in her eyes for the first time in days. The Exiles. The story of the Exiles was a shameful scar on humanity's history. 50 years prior, the discovery of the Kessler crystal on Mars promised limitless energy. A corporate conglomerate, backed by several nations, funded a massive colonization effort. Thousands signed up, scientists, engineers, and their families. But the crystal was unstable. A containment breach triggered a cataclysm that didn't just destroy the colony. It caused a phased dimensional shift, hurling the entire Martian sector and everyone in it into a volatile pocket of space-time. Earth, embroiled in resource wars sparked by the very promise of the crystal, declared the colony a loss. The survivors were written off, their pleas for rescue deemed impossible to answer. They were the forgotten, the abandoned. They did not die. They adapted, trapped in a lethal labyrinth of shifting gravity and bizarre radiation. The survivors, led by a gruff engineer named Eris Thorne, performed a miracle. Using the wreckage of their colony ships and the very anomalous physics that sought to kill them, they built a home. Not a station, but a ship. A single, massive vessel forged from necessity and profound collective grief. They called it the Remember Maru, after an ancient Earth legend of self-sacrifice. It was their ark, their fortress, and their memorial. For 5 decades, they silently watched Earth through unstable quantum rips, seeing its wars, its unifications, its celebrations, all while mourning their own abandonment. Now, as Earth fell silent before the Vexler, a different signal pierced the interference. It was not a plea from Earth Command. It was a raw, open transmission from a lunar listening post, a child's voice whispering into the dark. "Is anyone out there? Please," on the bridge of the Remember Maru, now stabilized in the outer solar system, that whisper echoed. Eris Thorn, old, his body hardened by decades of survival physics, stood before his crew, the children and grandchildren of the abandoned. They were not soldiers. They were welders, quantum theorists, hydroponic farmers, and historians. Their ship was a patchwork masterpiece, its hull scarred by temporal storms, its power core a jury-rigged Kessler crystal held in stasis by their own ingenuity. Thorn looked at their faces, seeing not fear of the Armada, but a cold, simmering fury. Earth had left them, but Earth was also the home of their grandparents' songs, of the concept of oceans and forests they taught from memory. It was their home, in a way the Vexler could never understand. "They think humanity is defined by its unified fleets," Thorn said, his voice a graveled rumble. "They're wrong. Humanity is defined by the stubborn spark that refuses to go out in the dark. That spark built this ship. That spark remembers. Today, we show them what remembering costs." He didn't give a rousing speech about saving Earth. He gave an order born of 50 years of righteous anger. "Bring the ghost drive online. Plot a course. We're going to teach these bullies the meaning of a bad day." The Remember Maru didn't move. It flickered. Its form became insubstantial, a ghost in the machine of reality, and shot towards the heart of the Vexler formation. The war for Earth was over. The revenge of the forgotten had just begun. The Vexler command ship, the World Reaper, was a monument to sterile efficiency. Admiral Kraz, a being of chitin and crystalline thought, observed the pacification of Earth. The Insectal's fleet was dust. Their cities were being mapped for resource extraction. The operation was proceeding within optimal parameters. Then, an anomaly bloomed on the sensor periphery. A vessel of insignificant mass, reading as a chaotic mixture of primitive alloys and impossible energy signatures, appeared inside the perimeter of the 7th cleansing sphere. It had not traversed space. It had sidestepped it. On the bridge of the Remember Maru, reality screamed. The Ghost Drive, a technology born of desperation in a dimensional hell, allowed short, terrifying jumps by momentarily phasing the ship out of sync with normal space. It was agony for the crew, a feeling of being stretched across eternity. As solidity returned, the main viewer filled with the monstrous hull of a Vexler harvester, close enough to see the molecular scarring on its armor. "Target is acquiring us," shouted Lena, Thorn's granddaughter and the ship's tactical officer. Her hands flew over consoles that were a mix of touchscreens and physical levers. "Fire the jitter beam," Thorn ordered, his eyes locked on the screen. The Vexler harvester fired its null beam. Instead of meeting solid matter, it passed through a cascading series of afterimages. The Remember Maru was no longer where it was a nanosecond ago. Its quantum flux drive, designed to survive chaotic space-time, created a localized probability field, making it effectively impossible to hit with a targeted beam. While the harvester's systems recalibrated, the Maru fired its own weapon. Not a beam of destruction, but a modulated pulse of coherent gravity waves. It didn't hit the hull. It struck the harvester's inertial dampening field, overloading it in a rapid, unpredictable rhythm. To the Vexler crew, it felt as if the universe itself had the hiccups. The ship lurched violently, systems shorted out, and structural integrity alarms wailed as its own immense mass threatened to tear it apart. It drifted, crippled, and helpless. On the World Reaper, Admiral Cross analyzed the data. The unknown vessel's technology was absurd. It was not superior, it was wrong. It violated fundamental principles of orderly warfare. A sense of profound irritation, the Vexler equivalent of rage, began to simmer. He dispatched 3 destroyers of the void, swift predators designed to eradicate tactical nuisances. The battle that followed was not a battle of power, but of cognition. The destroyers fired volleys of plasma torpedoes that tracked with relentless precision. The Remember Maru dove towards the debris field of the human defense fleet. Using its gravity manipulators, it flung chunks of wreckage into the paths of the torpedoes. It phased out moments before impact, letting the Vexler weapons destroy their own salvos. It emitted a burst of scrambled sensor noise that mimicked a dozen ghost signatures, confusing the destroyer's targeting. In a final, audacious move, the Maru used its phase jump to appear directly between 2 destroyers. It released a concentrated burst of its own anomalous radiation, a byproduct of its Kessler core. This chaos echo radiation played havoc with Vexler Neuralink systems. The 2 destroyers, their crews suddenly, experiencing sensory psychosis, veered into each other in a cataclysmic explosion. The 3rd destroyer broke off, reporting not a military defeat, but an ontological hazard. On Earth, in bunkers and shattered cities, people saw the flashes in the sky. At first, they thought it was more of their own ships dying. But then, shaky footage from surviving telescopes showed it, a small, jagged ship, dancing amidst the Vexler giants, leaving confusion and wreckage in its wake. A name, buried in old archives, was whispered. Remember Maru. The exiles. They had come back. In the Swiss bunker, General Petrova seized the moment. Open a channel on that old hardline frequency. Send them everything we have on the Vexler fleet composition, their command ship signature, their likely targets. And add a message. The garden is worth the thorns. Aboard the Maru, receiving the data and the old exile recognition code, Thorne allowed himself a grim smile. Earth was acknowledging them. Not rescuing, not commanding. Acknowledging. The data stream revealed the Vexler's pattern. They were targeting planetary power grids to facilitate their metabolization process. Their next major target was the fusiothermal tap under the Pacific Rim. They're going for the planet's pulse, Thorne said. We can't stop them all, but we can make a stand they'll feel. Plot a jump to the Pacific grid locus. It's time to stop dancing and plant our feet. The Remember Maru, leaking energy and, with half its systems redlined, phased once more. It reappeared not as a ghost, but as a shield, placing itself directly between the descending Vexler harvester fleet and the vital planetary installation. It was a declaration. The insects were not just buzzing annoyingly. One of them had grown a stinger, and it was ready to sting. Silence fell over the Pacific locus. A dozen Vexler harvesters, each capable of draining a continent's energy in hours, hung in the sky like vultures. Between them and the churning, massive geothermal platform below floated the Remember Maru, a speck of defiant rust against a wall of polished death. Admiral Cross, his irritation now a cold fire, personally oversaw the operation from the World Reaper. This insectal anomaly would be studied, then dissected. All vessels converge and eradicate with kinetic saturation, Cross pulsed. The null beam was ineffective against the ship's probability field, but raw, physical projectiles moving at relativistic speeds would fill space with enough mass to render dodging impossible. Aboard the Maru, the crew felt the weight of the moment. Systems were failing. The ghost drive capacitors were burnt out, no more phasing. The probability field emitter was at 12% integrity. Thorne, strapped into his command chair, looked at his family, his crew. We knew this day might come, he said, his voice calm. We built this ship to remember. Today, we give Earth something to remember us by. All power to forward shielding and gravity projectors. We're not dodging. We're digging in. The Vexler fired. A storm of tungsten rods, accelerated to a fraction of light speed, filled space. The Maru's gravity projectors, designed to move asteroids, whined at maximum power. They couldn't stop the rods, but they could bend them. The projectors created a swirling vortex of distorted gravity, a cosmic slalom. Rods meant for the ship's heart were pulled off course, slamming into each other in flashes of light or streaking past to hit the harvesters behind them. The Maru shook violently with each near miss, its patchwork hull groaning. Alerts blared. A section of hydroponics blew out into the void. But it held. Kraz watched, his analytical mind struggling. The vessel was using fundamental forces as a shield. It was inefficient, wasteful, and brilliant. He ordered the harvesters to close in and use point defense plasma casters, a tool for clearing orbital debris, now turned on a warship. The Maru was being chewed apart. Its portside engine nacelle was sheared off. Fires erupted in secondary compartments. Yet it fought back not with beams but with context. It fired projectiles of its own, canisters of processed Kessler crystal waste. When Vexler plasma hit them, they didn't explode. They underwent a rapid, localized decay, emitting a burst of temporal static. For a few seconds, the targeted harvester systems would experience time at different rates, causing catastrophic computer failures and leaving them dead in space. One by one, harvesters were disabled, not destroyed, but trapped in bubbles of messed-up time. On Earth, the world watched. The battle was now visible from the coasts, a silent, terrible light show in the high atmosphere. People saw the giant alien ships flicker and die, and the tiny, stubborn light that refused to be extinguished. A new message spread, not from governments, but from person to person. The Maru stands. In the bunker, Petrova and her team had an epiphany. The Vexler technology was seamless, interconnected, a single orderly mind. The Maru was chaos, adaptation, survival. It was a virus in their sterile system. Send the Maru the schematics for our old global comms network, Petrova ordered. The one with the redundant satellite nodes. Tell them to use it as a carrier wave. Aboard the dying Maru, Thorne received the data. He understood. Lena, coughing smoke, pieced it together. Their command ship, it's the brain. It's linked to all of them. It's orderly. We can give it a headache it can't ignore. Using its last functional emitter, the Remember Maru began broadcasting. But it wasn't a signal. It was a scream. It pumped the raw, unfiltered chaos echo radiation, the signature of the hellscape that had forged them, into the ancient Earthcom network, amplifying it across 1,000 satellites and broadcasting it in all directions. It was a wave of pure, metaphysical noise, the sound of survival against impossible odds, the scream of the abandoned, the song of a people who refused to be erased. To humans, it was static. To the neurologically linked Vexler fleet, it was insanity. Harvesters began to move erratically, firing on each other. Smaller ships spiraled out of control. The flawless formation descended into chaotic, self-destructive pandemonium. On the World Reaper, Admiral Kraz experienced something no Vexler had in millennia: pain. The chaotic signal was a corrosive acid in his mind, shattering his perfect connection to the Armada. He saw not data, but memories, human memories, stolen echoes from the Maru's crew. The taste of a Mars-born child's first synthesized apple. The sound of a lullaby sung by a mother-facing vacuum. The crushing loneliness of the abandonment. It was illogical, emotional, and devastating. For the first time, he understood. These were not insects. They were storytellers. And this was their final, furious story. The Remember Maru, a burning, shattered hulk, drifted silently amidst the chaos it had sown. It had done its job. The Armada was in disarray. The shield had held, but it was broken. Inside, amidst the sparks and the sirens, Eris Thorne looked at the image of Earth on his cracked viewer, whole and unmetabolized. He smiled. They had been remembered. They had remembered. The silence was profound. The Vexler Armada, once a perfect geometric blight on the sky, was a scattered, confused swarm. Ships drifted aimlessly or listed in slow, damaged circles. The corrosive psychic scream of the Remember Maru had shattered their hive mind coordination, leaving each vessel an isolated, traumatized entity. The World Reaper itself hung motionless, its psychic emanations reduced to pained, discordant whispers. On Earth, the reprieve was met not with cheers, but with a breath held too long. Everyone looked to the burning beacon that had bought them this moment. The Remember Maru. It was venting atmosphere and fluids, a dark scar across its middle where the primary hull was nearly severed. It was clearly dying. In the Swiss bunker, General Petrova's voice cut through the stunned silence. All remaining aerospace assets, scramble. Target is the Wexler command ship. Maximum yield munitions. Focus fire on its propulsion and primary weapon array. It was a desperate gamble. The Armada was wounded, not dead. If the World Reaper recovered, it could reassert control. A handful of ancient stealth bombers, suborbital fighters, and the last surviving submarine-launched missiles streaked upwards. They were gnats compared to the Wexler behemoth, but they were all humanity had left. As they approached, point defense fire from still functional Armada ships began to pick them off. The attack was failing. Then, something else moved. From the wreckage of the Remember Maru, a smaller shape ejected, its sole remaining auxiliary craft, a rugged utility pod modified for asteroid mining. At its controls was Lena, her face streaked with soot and tears. Behind her, in the pod's cramped space, were the last conscious members of the crew, including the gravely injured Eris Thorn. "The core," Thorn whispered, his breathing ragged. "It's the only thing left with enough punch and enough wrongness." He was talking about the Kessler Crystal Power Core, still burning with unstable energy in the heart of the dying Maru. Its containment was failing. Lena understood. This wasn't a flight to safety. It was a delivery, using the pod's tractor beam, a tool for moving ore. She latched onto the massive, unstable core just as the Maru's final safety protocols disengaged. The pod strained, its engines screaming, hauling the pulsing, erratic heart of the ship with it. She flew not towards safety, but on a collision course with the World Reaper, using the last of the Maru's transmitted chaos signal as a jamming screen. Admiral Kraz, fighting to reorder his own mind, saw the approaching signal. He mistook it for a continuation of the psychic attack, a final, concentrated burst. He ordered all remaining defensive power to his psychic shielding, bracing for another wave of corrosive emotion. He left his physical armor relatively unguarded. Lena's pod, dragging the Starhawk core, slammed into the World Reaper's lower hull. The mining pod vaporized instantly. The Kessler core containment finally gone did not simply explode. It unfolded. A sphere of golden, violet energy bloomed, not just destroying matter, but temporarily rewriting the laws of physics in a localized area. Gravity inverted. Energy became matter. Causality looped. For a few kilometers around the impact, reality became a reflection of the hell that had birthed the Remember Maru. The World Reaper didn't blow up. It came apart, its structure dissected by impossible forces, its remains sucked into a brief, terrible singularity that winked out of existence, leaving only scattered, molten debris. With the central mind destroyed, the remaining Wexler ships went completely inert. Their systems, designed to function only within the hive, shut down. The Great Armada became nothing more than ominous, silent sculptures in the orbit of Earth. The victory was absolute. It was also hollow. Weeks later, a memorial service was held in orbit. Not for the dead of Earth, though there were millions, but for the exiles. The last transmission from Lena's pod had been simple. "Tell them, we finally came home." A single, salvaged Wexler scout ship, repurposed by human engineers, drifted near the debris field that was once the Remember Maru. Aboard it, General Petrova and representatives from a newly forming Earth Council released a capsule. It contained the names of every exile who had died on Mars, every soul who had lived on the Maru, and the ship's log. It was set on a course to drift forever between Earth and Mars, an eternal monument. On Earth, the story transformed. The Remember Maru was no longer a tale of shameful abandonment. It became a legend of the unbreakable human spirit. It proved that humanity's strength was not in its perfect unity, but in its stubborn, resilient fragments, in the outcasts, the forgotten, the ones who, when pushed to the brink, could rewrite the rules of the game with sheer, unadulterated will. Admiral Kra's final, fragmented thought had been correct. Humanity were storytellers, and the story they told the galaxy that day was a warning. Underestimate them not for their chaos, for in that chaos lies a creativity more formidable than any ordered power. They may fight each other, they may fail, they may abandon their own. But when faced with extinction, they will produce a miracle from the rubble of their regrets, and they will do it with a remembered lullaby on their lips and a home to defend. The alien Armada had underestimated humanity. One warship built from sorrow and memory had proven them wrong. And the universe, listening to the static echo of that victory, learned a new and unsettling word: hope.